All right, welcome back into FST, Fantasy Sports Today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here. It's time now for NFL Week 3, start or sit. Oh, wait, everyone's ready? Here we go. Okay, we start with Carolina. Andy Dalton under center. I believe that changes Carolina. Not completely. I'm still leaning Raiders on this side. So you have Chuba Hubbard at the Raiders or Devin Singletary at Cleveland. Tough defense there for Devin Singletary, but Daniel Jones does need someone to bail him out. Joe, how are you leaning, Hubbard or Singletary, and why?
Look, I think the move to Andy Dalton changes some things, but look, from worse to bad is still pretty bad. So I can't quite get there yet. I will say Devin Singletary last week looked good. The Cleveland defense is much better, also very good in the secondary, so you're going to have to run the football. So I think from a volume standpoint, I am going to look here for Devin Singletary. He gets the lean for me, but I get it. I think these guys are both on that fringe. I'm not excited about starting either one, but I'm encouraged about what I saw last week out of Devin Singletary. And if you're going to keep Daniel Jones and his powder dry, I think the best thing to do is to establish that run, take some pressure off of him, and hopefully you keep him upright as Myles Garrett chases him around the field.
It's going to be so much fun to watch.
It's going to be a good time.
Okay, let's move to wide receivers. Hello, Jerry. Jerry Jeudy. Look at that. Deshaun Watson trying to show the world. Or Brandon Cooks. So the Cowboys have Baltimore. Cleveland has the Giants. Both teams are, I believe, on the road. Here's the thing with Dallas. I think everyone's going to be targeting the obvious names here. So is Cooks the lone outlier here? Is he going to help to beat Baltimore? I'm leaning Jerry Jeudy here. Joe, what do you say?
Yeah, Cooks is a little touchdown dependent. Now, he is at home against the Ravens this week, but still, the first week, 7 targets. Last week, just 2. So a little all over the map there. What you saw from Jeudy last week was something in the right direction. I got 14 targets in 2 weeks total. That is a little bit more consistent. They both have 1 touchdown on the year, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go against the Giants here in this one, take my shot at the weaker defense. Despite the fact that I'm far from enamored of the Deshaun Watson quarterback play, I think the opportunity here for Jerry Jeudy to at least come away with a solid PPR day is more likely. I think their touchdown equity is about the same. And Amari Cooper really so far has not done anything this year. Now, maybe this is the Amari Cooper game, right? We know this. He either smashes his over or is woefully underneath. There's very little in between. Jerry Jeudy's actually giving you the in between. So I think if you're looking for a flex guy, a third wide receiver in a deeper league here, Jerry Jeudy is probably the guy that you could take your double-digit points and get out, whereas Cooks has the ability to maybe have a bigger day, but also give you a 2-catch for a 30-day, and that's just not going to get it done at the end of it. So give me Jerry Jeudy here in this trend line that seems to be like perhaps he's establishing a rapport here with some of the other guys here, including Deshaun Watson. Yeah. So you got Deshaun Watson finding Elijah Moore. You've got him finding Jerry Jeudy. We'd like him to find Amari Cooper a little bit more, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. So Jeudy for me at the end of the day over Brandon Cooks today.
We should rename this segment Beggars or Choosers, by the way. Something to think about for next week. All right, here we go. Start, sit, moving on. Zach Ertz, the Commanders at Cincinnati, or Colby Parkinson for the Rams, home to the Niners here. The only thing is you'd have to wait for the Ertz stat. So I'm going to lean Parkinson just on that. But, Joe?
Yeah, look, Ertz was resting on Thursday. It's veteran stuff. I wouldn't really get too concerned with it. Both games he's played so far with Jane Daniels, he's had 4 targets in both of them. He's finished as tight end 18 and then tight end 8. Now, Colby Parkinson theoretically has a lot of target share that could become his. The problem is that offensive line is just, it's Swiss cheese right now. And I'm concerned of Matthew Stafford finishing this game. I'm concerned about Matthew Stafford's health in this game. I really am. So it's something, it is. And it's not like to make a joke of it either. It's legitimate in terms of the way I'm approaching it and investing in it or not investing in it. I think the 49ers are going to be hungry for a victory. I think it's going to be one where the defense knows that the offense is banged up and they're going to show up and they're going to win this game for them. So at the end of the day, even though Parkinson is tempting and might have more upside, I think Ertz might be the safer play. So they're going to be behind. They're going to have to throw the football, Washington, against the Bengals. That's a good situation there. And with the ADOT so far that Jaden Daniels has shown us, he's not throwing a ball real far. That kind of goes into the wheelhouse here of the tight end, Zach Ertz. So give me Ertz here. It's very close, but I'll take Ertz here for the win.
Joe, you're using that stat A dot for those that are new to it. Average depth of target, correct?
Correct.
All right, let's go to quarterbacks based off of the average depth of target. Geno Smith for the Seattle Seahawks, a team that Joe believes just has padded stats, really hasn't played anyone, right? They have Miami, and then Justin Fields. Even in a loss, Pittsburgh can still show you that they're viable, and I think that's important here as Pittsburgh has the Chargers. I'm going to lean Justin Fields, but I want to hear from you, Joe.
There's another one where it's really close. Geno in that first game ran amok, right? But it was over Denver. Denver, a team that gives up rushing yards like it's candy at Halloween. Against New England, certainly looked really good. 33 completions through 327 yards, only one touchdown this one. But I like Geno at home against Miami. I keep waiting for Fields to have the big breakout game here. I feel like this one's going to really just get pulled down into the mud. And between Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, this sort of game has the opportunity to be a real 13-10 kind of banger. And I think that limitation in the scoring is at the end of the day, it's going to hurt Fields potentially. I do think that Fields should continue to play regardless of Russell Wilson's health because you're winning football games. He gives you more opportunity to make plays. I think he's going to take less sacks because he's more mobile at the end of the day. So although you saw, I think things that you liked out of Fields, there was a couple of plays that got called back last week too, again on him. There could have been some bigger plays where we might feel better about Fields statistically. I would still lean Geno at home against the Dolphins because that defense isn't very good either. So give me what I know here. I hope that I'm wrong about the Field situation in terms of the score and this total today. But Vegas is telling you they're not looking for a big total. Herbert's not 100%. I can see a lot of running the football, both of these teams here. And Fields will run as well. But unless Fields has that one big breaking run, I think Geno's the smarter start here for week 3.
All right, moving on here, another quarterback battle. Look around at signs in your life, and you'll pretty much be able to tell if you're doing something right or wrong. If you have the dilemma of starting Matthew Stafford or Daniel Jones, I hate to tell you, but something has gone wrong along the way. But that's the battle we have. Is it Matt Stafford, who Joe believes will be under dirt by the second quarter, or Daniel Jones? Tough battle at the dog pound.
Look, this is tough. They are right back to back in rankings. It is, and it shouldn't be, right? It should be Stafford easily. But if you're taking away the offensive line and you're taking away the weapons and you have a tough opponent, I have a hard time getting there. Daniel Jones has a myriad of issues. We know this already. But if you take Daniel Jones and you look at him as a guy that has some mobility, right? Ran for 32 yards last week. I know it's a tough matchup. I know it's on the road in Cleveland. There's a lot of reasons to be skeptical of this. But I'm looking for fantasy points. And even if they're ugly, I think Daniel Jones might be able to get me the ugly fantasy points this week. And I hate myself for saying this. I do. I'm going to need a shower after this segment because it's so dirty to feel like I want to start Daniel Jones over Matthew Stafford. But what I saw last week out of that Rams offensive line with all those injuries and all those weapons being gone, you're really putting Matthew Stafford in a tough spot. And I don't want to be this omen of bad news, but if Stafford gets hit or Stafford takes too many shots or if they're down by a lot, maybe Stafford's not in this fourth quarter. Like maybe it's just one of those kind of games. And I'm concerned about that. You can't score fantasy points if you're not on the field or if you're taking a million sacks. So give me Daniel Jones. I'm just going to hope for the best of whatever Daniel Jones can give us. Last week, it was actually QB6. As absurd as that sounds, Daniel Jones finished as the top 10 quarterback last week. Matthew Stafford did not. So sometimes ugly is the way to go. Speaking of ugly, injuries abound. We already told you that Jordan Love is not going to play this week. So it's going to be Malik Willis again, but that's not the only injury to get you updated. We've got a lot going on here, including the status of Ken Walker, the status of some of the big players in fantasy. Who's in, who's out, we'll tell you.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Daboll has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Daboll to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over/under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. My name is Matt Striker. His name is Joe Pisapia. It is a party here, my friends. All the things that go on stay right here, but you're, of course, part of the party, not that kind of party. Joe Pisapia, my friend, it is time to look at the NFL injury update. This is an important one. We have some news for players that will be out, news for players that will be playing. Let's start in Dallas. CeeDee Lamb and his ankle. Will he be playing today? And do fans wish that he would do more?
Yes, he will be playing. Yes, he will have a good game. I do believe that. I'm not worried about him against the Baltimore Ravens, to be honest. I'm not worried about him against anybody. He is that kind of a player. Last week, 4 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. That works for me. It was only good enough to finish as wide receiver 15, but I think you're seeing him get back on track. After this, he gets a matchup against the Giants, too, coming up. So it's a tough schedule for the Cowboys. You know, you got Baltimore, you got Pittsburgh in 2 weeks, then you got the Lions, you got the San Francisco 49ers, you got the Atlanta Falcons coming. So, look, the Cowboys have got to get their stuff together, if you know what I mean, because the schedule is not going to be a help to them, which means you can't keep losing home games. Now, this is a tough spot here because you got the Ravens coming off a home loss of their own. Do we think the Ravens are going to go 0-3? Because that's going to be a huge story in the league if that happens. And Dallas Cowboys, going 1-2 would not be the way they would want to start. So this is a big game here, a marquee matchup for 2 huge teams that have, playoff aspirations and Super Bowl aspirations. But the good news from a fantasy perspective is he is going to play and he's a full go. So you should feel really good about starting him.
Listen, 0-2 Ravens, 0-3 Ravens. All that means to me is angry Derrick Henry, and I don't want that.
Yes.
I mean, as a Derrick Henry fantasy manager, I do, but as everyone else in the world, I don't want that, so I can't see it happening. That's going to be a battle. All right, let's head out to San Francisco, where they are just absolutely harangued with injuries. Let's talk George Kittle and what that means for this offense overall.
If only somebody spoke all offseason about what happens when teams lose the Super Bowl in dramatic fashion, what happens to them next year. Things fall apart, literally. And look, we were on them week 1. We told you they were going to beat the crap out of the Jets, and they did. But we told you to fade the 49ers over this year. Why? Because this is what happens every single year. And even last year, we lived through it with the Eagles, and nobody cared. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, this is terrible. I can't believe this happened. And then, who was the number 2 team on the board this year to go to win the Super Bowl? Oh, it was the 49ers. They can't get out of their own way right now. You got no CMC. You're going to have no George Kittle today. No Deebo Samuel today. Both those guys are out. So it means a lot of Juwan Jennings. He's a streamer today. If you had Deebo, you could throw in Jawan Jennings off the waiver wire, play him. That's perfectly fine. I think you're going to be okay in this game. Long term is going to be more of an issue. You got to figure things out. But when you have these guys missing big time weeks, over and over and over again, it's a problem. You got the Rams at their weakest point, so you should get this victory today. But the 49ers schedule also not an easy one. Okay, you got to keep that in mind. That's what took its toll on that Eagles team. Injuries and the schedule. By the time you got to week 10, that team was burnt out of both of those things. So streaming tight end options, Zach Ertz might be available. Mike Gesicki might be available. Pat Freiermuth, Colby Parkinson. That's the group that you're looking to stream from. Hopefully you can find one of those guys to stream today. Evan Ingram's injury does not look good either. He is going to be more of a game time decision, it looks like. It looks like that never goes in the right direction. So Kittle, another guy out this week. You have to make your plans now.
All right, let's make some plans for a running back or a flex position here. As a proud manager of a team called Mixin' It Up, I'm beside myself. Joe Mixon, as I understand it, will not play today. Are people running out? Is Cam Akers a viable option here? What's going on in Houston?
Well, that's the thing. Pierce out, Mixon out, so you couldn't go to the normal handcuff of Dameon Pierce. So now it looks like Cam Akers is next man up. Now he had 7 attempts for 32 last time we saw him. Matchup today against Minnesota. It's one that I think is kind of dangerous for the Houston Texans. Minnesota is one of these teams that I think is playing with no expectations, and they're super dangerous right now. Sam Darnold is playing with confidence. Justin Jefferson looks like an absolute monster. So this is a spot here where don't be surprised, kids. Houston, a team that doesn't usually cover very well on the road when they're favorites historically. If they go in there and drop one without that run game going, without things exactly where they need it to be, I'm not saying that the Texans can't win. I'm saying Minnesota's a really interesting piece. But from a fantasy perspective right now, it's getting tough out there to find these streaming running backs. So if Akers is available, you pick up Akers, you stream him this week. But is he going to replace what Joe Mixon gave you the first couple of weeks? The answer is no. So it's a really tough situation here for the Houston Texans. They might become a little bit more one-dimensional. And CJ Stroud's got to pick things up a little bit too. This is the spot where if you're the big leader, you got to step up and make the big plays. And Nico Collins, another guy that's been dealing with injury issues all week. Now he's going to play too, but he is not 100%. So interesting game here, one to watch very carefully from a fantasy and wagering perspective today.
Gotta love it. Great job, Joe Pisapia. Let's talk Cincinnati here as they start to become a bit more recognizable to the casual fan. They're going to get a big piece back today.
They are. T. Higgins, who, again, one of the best wide receivers on the planet. I think people forget. Will he be on a bit of a pitch count? My guess is not much. If he's ready to go and they've waited this long, he should be ready to be a full go. Practice reports were all good on T. Higgins. Again, it's a great matchup against Washington. He doesn't have to play a full complement of snaps to be fantasy relevant. He is a wide receiver 3 already this week for me. That's where I have him in the rankings. It's a great matchup against Washington, and it really helps Jamar Chase as well. Some other injuries, too, to get to. Ken Walker, another game missed, which means Zach Charbonnet. If he's out there on the waiver wire, he's one of the better running backs you can plug and play this week for sure. I would be looking for Charbonnet, another one of those guys. A lot of people are down on Zamir White. If you can acquire Zamir White in a trade, do that because it's a great matchup for him against Carolina today. And we know Antonio Pierce wants to get him 20 touches. He is very vocal about getting Zamir White the football and getting this guy some action. And I think he's going to get that today. So there's options and ways you can go. Tony Pollard has a good matchup today. If you can pull off a trade for him, if you're somebody who's a little worried about their backfield, those are some guys to look at. Some more injury news and notes, too, as we go through. Brian Burns on the defensive side is going to play today. Greg Dortch with the hamstring also in. So is Nick Bosa. Finally, some good news for the San Francisco 49ers. On the quarterback side, Justin Herbert is preparing to play. So hopefully he can make it through this game. But this is another situation to monitor. The under in this game, especially if Herbert comes out, is one that's likely to hit. So keep a close eye on this one. And good news, Michael Pittman is in as well. So when we come back, more FST right after this.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST with Matt and Joe. It's time now to win something. I like to win money. Let's do it. Futures update time. This is great because we take a look at a lot of the futures awards. We do it across all sports. We're focusing on football here this week and every week for the foreseeable future. And we look at how the numbers change. And if you can get in something at a really good number, Joe is the king of cashing out. Because a lot of times you're in on something, you got it in at plus money, and then the world catches up. Next thing you know, it's moving into the minus. You can cash out, and that's a smart way to make a profit. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this here. NFL regular season defensive player of the year for this season. Joe, you want to point out how odds have moved for one particular player. Take it away.
Yeah, well, TJ Watt was always the favorite for this award, and TJ Watt has played out of his mind so far this year. But our pick at plus 1,600 to start the year was Aiden Hutchinson, a guy whose expected sack total, again, when you look back and see all the data from 2023, was supposed to be significantly higher. He just had a lot of bad luck in terms of just missing the quarterback, guys throwing out of sacks, weird flags, issues that would come up, right? Guess what? Guess who is now number 2 at plus 470? Aiden Hutchinson. So that number has moved significantly in just 2 weeks. Hutchinson looked tremendous last week. Except for that one point where he had to kind of stop Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield getting a little juke there. But Baker Mayfield's playing like an MVP on his own. But Hutchinson's one of these guys. I think this is the 2-horse race potentially this year. TJ Watt's had problems staying healthy. And that was the other reason to go on the Hutchinson side of this award, because historically speaking, Watt is always one of these favorites, but he ends up with incomplete seasons. And depending on what time that happens, it really does impact his ability to win this award. So these are 2 guys very worthy of it, something to monitor. If you didn't bet any of them yet, you're getting 4+ odds on 4-1 right now. I mean, that's a great number for either of these guys. You can put a little on both and see which one grows and which one stays healthy. But it's worth noting already what a difference just 2 weeks can make, and why we circled that number and we said this number is way too high. It's a great opportunity to get in. And it's okay if you already made money on it and you're offered to cash out in the next couple of weeks, because you don't have to see every wager to its end. You have to see every wager you can see into its profit. And I think that changing of the mindset is a great thing of how to go from kind of one of these people who bets on sports as a casual person to one who bets on it with a little bit more purpose. Understand it's about the profit at the end of the day. You don't have to see every single bet to the end just to get that.
Yeah, I love it. That may be one of the most important things you've said, not only on this show today, but just overall. I really think that should be cut, clipped and put on our social media because that's important. All right, let's talk offensive rookie of the year here. From one week to another, it's just such a volatile market. It's a quarterback's award. Jaden Daniels sitting at plus 320. Caleb Williams at the same price, but he can't win it on his back. And then here comes Marvin Harrison Jr. And after last week, the number has changed. And now he as well is plus 320. But he wasn't always at that number, was he, Joe?
No, he was not. He was third for this award. Now everyone's tied because everyone's going, well, we don't know. And that's kind of what we were talking about going in, which is the only thing I did feel confident about regarding this award was that it wasn't Caleb Williams running away for me. It just wasn't. And I thought one of the most interesting moments last week was at the end of the game where Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud are together, and Stroud, who just went through his rookie season, trying to give a little talk here to Caleb and saying, hey, man, use this, learn from this. And Caleb Williams had the same face that I've seen a lot of the 12-year-olds that I coach, which is some of the kids with great talent who don't have a great understanding about what's going to make them a great player, which is, yeah, I'm great, I know, whatever, and just not listening or not hearing. And you see that sometimes, but you shouldn't see that in a 24-year-old young man or however old Caleb Williams is right now. You should see that right now as a guy who is trying to learn, try to soak it in, take what you can get from somebody like a CJ Stroud. What are you doing here? Why aren't you listening to him? This is a guy that took a Texans team that was miserable, that nobody thought was going to win 3 games. And he took them to the playoffs. Okay. And he won Rookie of the Year. This guy's got something to share with you. Listen to it. It's that kind of stuff about Caleb Williams that always drove me nuts when I watched him in college. And I'm seeing that same attitude in the NFL. And that's why I wasn't betting on him. Marvin Harrison, it's tough. It's a quarterback award. Jaden Daniels was our 650 favorite. Now it's at 320. It's anybody's game right here. It's just interesting to watch how this futures market has already shifted considerably in just 2 weeks.
All right, with the time that we have left, let's shift it over to Coach of the Year. So Jim Harbaugh sits at plus 650, Mike McDonald plus 850, and there's Kevin O'Connell plus 1,000. How do you lean?
Well, look, I told you, I'm not ready to anoint the Seahawks yet. This is a big game for them. Let's see them beat Miami handily, and then we can talk about them. Kevin O'Connell's done a great job here with Sam Darnold. If they get another victory today, if they beat the Houston Texans, you'll see O'Connell go. If Harbaugh somehow pulls out a victory against the Steelers today, that narrative will grow too. It's one to watch as you continue looking at the futures market. We'll be right back after this.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. They've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get neighbors and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorlis told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here. The mics are hot, as Cool Hand Luke says in my ear before we come in. It's time now to do some over-under. Joey P, I'm going to have some fun with you here. Let's talk. Kirk Cousins, remember him? Everyone was off of him after 1 week. Here they are all back. Oh, yeah, him. I love it. We're such a fickle kind of society. 229.5 passing yards. Does Kirk Cousins go over or under that number today?
I think he goes over it. And I think you have to look at, what this game's going to be, which is potentially a shootout here. So you have all the injuries to that backfield of the Kansas City Chiefs. So a lot of people wondering about Carson Steele and about Samaje Perine. And the answer is it's going to be some combination. And it's probably going to be gross. And what it's going to come down to is Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins throwing the football all around. I think people were way too dismissive of the Falcons in week 1. They were playing the Steelers. Absolutely. Cousins hadn't played in a long time. These guys hadn't played together. It's all the same logic of why I was concerned with the Jets in week 1. They were in a bad situation where they hadn't played together all preseason. Rodgers hadn't played in a year, and things looked flat. And that's what happened in week 1. Week 2 certainly was much better as you look forward, right? And now you've seen even the Jets, right? Even looking better on offense now. So it takes time for these things to happen. And it takes time for Kirk Cousins and Pitts and Drake London, all these pieces to work, right? And I think you are going to see that today. 229.5, I think is a very achievable number. And you know that the Chiefs offense is going to go out there and do their job. And Mahomes knows that he's going to have to make a lot of things happen. And don't be surprised if you don't see Mahomes run a little bit too. That's one thing too, when there's running back injuries, sometimes Mahomes is going to be less afraid to run the ball himself or have a couple design runs built in that playbook. So Carson Steele is a guy you can play this week. Same with Perine. But just limit your expectations. I think Steele has more touchdown equity, Perine a little bit more PPR equity. But Darrell Williams, Darnell Williams, Charkandrick West, I mean, we can go down the road of disappointing backup running backs for the Kansas City Chiefs that never have paid fantasy gold or dividends. So just temper your expectations. But I would go over for Cousins today on the passing. Again, just like I did on Monday night. And we got a victory there too.
All right, let's continue to roll here. The Indianapolis Colts taking in a majority of their handle for this afternoon's matchup. They need to get back to the run, according to Joey P. That means Jonathan Taylor. 71.5 is the number. Over or under on that for his rushing yards?
I think this is an over, and I think it's one where it's necessary. If you're Shane Steichen, you have to say, what went wrong last week? And I think you just got to get Jonathan Taylor the football more. Take a little bit more pressure off Anthony Richardson. You should have done it last week on the road. I think you might have gotten a better result. Unfortunately, you're on to week 3. You live and learn. And Shane Steichen's a good lesson learner. He's a smart coach. It's a good offensive line to run the football. I think they get home. They get back to running the football. Pittman's going to play in this game. He was not 100% either. You're going to get Josh Downs back in this game. So if you give Richardson a good support system of rushing the football, I think that opens up the play action. It opens up a lot more for Richardson to do. You simplify the looks for him. That's what you want at the end of the day. If you run those play actions with young quarterbacks, okay, this is my first look right after that play action. It gets simple for them. They get in a rhythm. That's what you want to establish with Anthony Richardson to build his confidence a little bit. So you're in a good spot here. And I think Taylor has touchdown equity always, especially in this game today, especially in this matchup. So I'd look for Taylor to be pushing closer to that 100 total than the 71.5. I think that's just a necessity for this game here if you're going to win. And I think getting back home in that building is a good thing for them and for Taylor.
All right, we'll keep the conversation going. You mentioned Michael Pittman Jr. Let's talk. 51.5 receiving yards. Anything going to stand in that way, over or under?
Yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor in the run game. So if I'm pushing that narrative and I'm pushing a little simplification and Josh Downs, who's a big playmaker, comes back here, that I think the 51.5, it's very similar to the Terry McLaurin situation where Pittman, I think, is one of these guys that you want to buy long-term, but in the short term, you just need to see a little bit more happen here. Now, I could be absolutely wrong on this one, that one big play, because Richardson's capable of doing that. We've seen it. He's so explosive that this could easily be incorrect. But if you're looking about setting your lineup and you're understanding the limitations of Pittman, you have to account for that in your flex spot. Maybe have somebody who's a little bit more explosive there, right? You want to make sure you get the Shaheeds in, or, maybe the Xavier Worthies are a little bit more worthy of a flex spot today if you have a guy like Pittman as your wide receiver 2 or 3. So Pittman is a player right now that, again, I'm going toward the under in the 51.5. He can be useful, of course. He's a great player. And I do believe over time, things will get better for him. but we're still in September, and I just think we have to have a little bit more patience. But if you don't have patience, there might be some other guys you might start over. T. Higgins, I think, is a perfect example of a guy you can have that conversation. T. Higgins, I think, might be in line for a better day than Michael Pittman when all is said and done.
Okay. All right, actually, let's pull that game up, actually. Washington and Cincinnati. Let's take a receiver from each team and have the conversation. You were mentioning Terry McLaurin. Let's start there. Terry McLaurin is 48.5 receiving yards here. How do you lean?
Again, this is another one of those unders. A lot of the stuff we talked about in hour one of the average depth of target being very short for Jaden Daniels. Until that starts to change, and it could change today in garbage time. And I'm encouraging, if I'm Dan Quinn, I'm saying to Jaden Daniels, hey, we're down by a touchdown, down by 2 touchdowns. Go out there like it's LSU in the fourth quarter and you're just putting up points. Go play with reckless abandon. Don't worry about throwing picks. Sit in the pocket a little longer. Try to make that read. Use that big arm of yours. It takes time for confidence to build in young quarterbacks. And what you've seen so far in Jaden Daniels is when things get rough, he dumps it off or he runs, and that is normal. That's typical of the rookie quarterback experience. Unfortunately, it's not good for Terry McLaurin right now. It should get better over time, but this week, again, it's a lower number, 48.5. I would still go under this one until further notice, until you start to see some of that. And if we're wrong about it, that's a good thing because then hopefully we can build on that for week 4.
Obviously, Commanders' offensive ecosystem differs greatly from the Bengals. In that case, you have Joe Burrow sits there, will be more patient. What does that mean for Jamar Chase here? 81.5 is the number. Is it finally time?
Yes, it's definitely time. It's definitely time against the Washington Commanders. I think this is the beginning for Jamar Chase to have a massive season. And I think September will be a distant memory like it is every year. Every year, the Bengals stink in September. I don't know when we're going to learn.
And the Julio Rodriguez.
I mean, it is.
Right?
I remember Mark Teixeira back in the day for the Yankees, right? He would be the worst April player ever. And every May 1st, you buy him, and he was good the rest of the year. It was like the Bengals, the Philadelphia Phillies up until this season, right? A team that always struggled in the beginning, and then they turn it on. Like, that's just who the Bengals are. But this matchup against that secondary Washington is so good. I know 81.5 is a big number. I think this could be one of those big 2-touchdown, 110 games for Jamar Chase. I see that coming here.
All right, speaking of 2 touchdowns, let's pivot to a quarterback now here. Baker Mayfield, 1.5 pass touchdowns here. So what do we think about Baker today?
Look, man, I know this sounds hot takey, but the first 2 weeks of the season, Baker Mayfield, I think, would get my MVP vote. He has been so good. He went into Detroit, pulled out a big victory there. He has been the leader. He has been the guy. He is making everybody useful. It's a good matchup here against Denver. Denver's an offense that is just awful. Bo Nix can't. And going back to that conversation we were having about the rookie quarterbacks, right? He's another guy. Should Bo Nix be starting in week 1? No. He should be sitting, watching, learning, getting to a point where he's comfortable in practices over 6 months, and then next year maybe starting. But we keep throwing these guys to the Wolves, and the Wolves keep getting fed. And this is a great opportunity here where Bo Nix is going to give Baker Mayfield's offense opportunities, short fields. And Baker knows what to do with them. Baker's mobile, Baker's making plays, and he seems really beloved by his teammates. And that is something that I feel like the maturity of Baker Mayfield, and another guy too, who we could probably say that same thing about, which is these young quarterbacks, where they land is everything. He landed in a bad spot in Cleveland. It was never going to get any better. He bounced to Carolina. He bounced to the Rams. He ended up in Tampa with the right situation. And guess what? All of a sudden now, this is the team that won that division last year, beat the Eagles in the playoffs, and still nobody gives them respect. And I think Baker Mayfield lives for that. So give me Baker over 1.5 touchdowns today. One of those touchdowns for Chris Godwin. We return the waiver wire for week 3.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST. It's Matt and Joe with you here right up until the next show that follows us. And then kickoff, and then you win. And then by 4 o'clock, you're sitting pretty, and then you're making outrageous bets, and then you give it all back. Don't do that. It's time for Waiver Wire here. And even though it's week 3, sometimes the moves that you make early on can win you leagues. Let's talk with a player here now, or about a player here now, owned in half leagues. Half of the leagues out there, he will be available. Half of them, he is already under contract, if you will. Joe believes that the time has come for the torch to be passed in Dallas. Let's talk Rico Dowdle.
Yeah, look, I think we're just being patient here with this Ezekiel Elliott thing is just not the way to go. The NFL teaches us one thing. This is when you get old and slow, the game literally passes you by. And Rico Dowdle's been working in the passing game, and Rico Dowdle looks like the far more explosive running back at this point in their career. And the Cowboys don't have time for games. I don't care about the history of Zeke in the organization, and Mike McCarthy better not either, because his job is hanging on by a thread. The last 2 times we saw Mike McCarthy in that building, he got his doors blown off last week by the New Orleans Saints, and then embarrassed in the playoffs by the youngest team in the NFL, the Green Bay Packers. And I mean absolutely embarrassed. So Mike McCarthy right now needs to start winning football games. And this is a really tough situation here against a very good Ravens team that is out for blood. Rico Dowdle needs to be carrying the football. The fact that he's only 50% rostered is insane. It's only a matter of time. And if it's not the performance of Zeke, age catches up with us in other ways. Matt will tell you, all us old guys, we get up in the morning and things hurt and we don't even know why. So him staying healthy for a whole season is also not a good bet. So rather bet on Rico Dowdle. Again, let's practice some patience. By the time we get to mid-October, it should be Rico Dowdle's backfield, but don't be surprised if it doesn't start to look more like that today.
All right, the following receiver, 63% rostered, will play for the Chargers. Great head coach and a quarterback that the health is a bit questionable here. Let's talk about Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, Quentin Johnston, a guy who has a tough matchup today against Joey Porter Jr., so you don't love the matchup. He's 63% rostered. I would still be stashing him on my bench, though, because last week's 2-touchdown performance was eye-opening. We know that the guy has some talent. We saw it in college. It's just whether or not this new coaching regime with Harbaugh could figure things out with him and get him the ball in ways that Quentin Johnston can be useful in fantasy. And they showed that that can happen. Now, tough matchup against a corner, also a quarterback who's not 100% healthy. That's a bad combination of things this week. So if Quentin Johnston somehow should be one of these guys that people pick up and then he doesn't do well and they drop him back to the waiver wire, I would still want to be rostering him. So if you have him, hold. don't expect too much this week. If you didn't get him, wait, trade for, or pick up when he gets dropped again. And if he's still floating out there, add to the back end of your roster just in case Quentin Johnson starts to emerge and start to cash in on some of that talent that made him a first-round pick years ago for the Chargers.
We've talked about in this show quite a bit the league's growing appetite for the flashy, young, mobile quarterback. And then we also talked about the benefit of having just that good old-fashioned pocket passer consistent. Derek Carr is that guy, 63% rostered across leagues. What are you saying to people out there?
This is exactly, I think, the poster boy for that conversation, right? Which is, where have all the Phillip Rivers gone? Well, there's Derek Carr still. Boring pocket passer.
I'm not going to get that song out of my head now, by the way. Thank you. Oh, don't help it along.
Where have all the pocket passers gone? See, I got no voice today, so I can't sing it.
Thank you.
Next week we'll have a full video for you. But Derek Carr, even in single quarterback leagues right now, you could justify starting over a lot of guys that just haven't played well. It's another matchup against the Eagles today. The Eagles secondary is not good. It's young, it's inexperienced, and Derek Carr is in a good spot here where I think that I don't know if it's going to last all season, but sometimes you got to live in the now. And if you've gotten off to an 0-2 start and your quarterback is killing you in a single quarterback league and Derek Carr's out there, pick up Derek Carr and play him and just see what happens. Because so far the results have been really good. The first week results, understandably good. Last week's results against Dallas, far more eye-opening. Maybe New Orleans has just kind of figured things out here, and maybe this team has just had enough time to play together and finally some health and some better situations. And confidence is a killer. And right now, the Saints are killers because they got a lot of confidence.
All right, let's move over to the Rams here. They're beleaguered on the offensive line with injuries. They're beleaguered with receivers with injuries. So all of a sudden, Jordan Whittington, only 13% rostered across all leagues, becomes at least a talking point. Joe?
Look, if you're in deeper leagues, you should stash this guy right now because Puka Nacua is not coming back for a long time. We don't know when the hell Cooper Kupp is coming back. There's going to be opportunity here, and you hope that eventually look, man, Demarcus Robinson, Johnson, like all these guys are okay, but Whittington's the one guy that really popped in the preseason where you went, wow, this guy's got a big explosive playmaking ability. Tutu Atwell is going to be in this mix too. It's going to be a lot of weird for the Rams offense in the next couple weeks, but it's also going to be a lot of opportunity. And I think right now Whittington has opportunity to make a play or two here and there. And I could see, just like we were, ahead of the curve last couple weeks with some of these players, where if that week is Sunday, right? If Sunday is Whittington having a big 50-yard touchdown catch or something like that, or he just has a big highlight reel moment, it's going to cost you a lot of free agent budget to go get him.
Yeah.
Sunday mornings, typically you can add people for free. Add and stash him just in case he does pop. If he doesn't, what does it cost you? The last player on your roster, and you burn and churn him. But I'd be holding this guy too, just to see if the next 2 weeks, maybe, just maybe, Jordan Whittington is a guy that could give you something and maybe become a flex-worthy player.
All right, we'll check out Jordan Whittington anytime TD and see what that returns. All right, let's close it out here with the defense. The Raiders, they are available in 8 out of 10 leagues. Let's talk.
Look, I don't care if Andy Dalton's starting a quarterback. The Panthers are still the Panthers. So pass rush is for real. I think they can create some opportunities. Max Crosby, my favorite football moment last week. Gardner Minshew throws a pick. And who's the first guy out there? On the field, Max Crosby grabbing him by the pad saying, "Don't worry, we got you. I want to see the Baker. I want to see the Baker Mayfield. I'd like to see Baker Mayfield. I want to see Gardner Minshew that I saw in college who was playing fast and loose and go out and be that guy." And guess what? Gardner Minshew shook the dust off and they got a W. That's leadership. That's football. Max Crosby's got that. I think the Raiders got something special. Great matchup today. Stream those Raiders. We return. More FST right after this.
You say this is a smash. I'm going to run out and smash my button while you talk about Ramondre Stevenson.
I don't think the Bengals defense is one that you should be fearful of. I think they're middle of the pack. they've lost the Bateses and some of those guys over the years that you used to fear. They got a lot of young kids in there who have some talent. But at the same time here, I do expect Ramondre to be a guy that is going to revert back to what he did a couple years ago.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
This would have been a bet that I would have lost big on in terms of betting on Trevor Lawrence thus far. Because, Vinny, I thought he was an absolute rock-solid, can't-miss first overall pick.
They're underachieving a bit. I mean, I don't think this is the best adjustment team with Doug Peterson. He's not the best adjuster. If everything's kind of falling into place and everyone's executing well and he can just do what they want to do.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Brian Dable has been feeling it. He's in a foul mood. He's having stare downs with Pat Leonard and everything else.
John Mara wants Brian Dable to go and get the next quarterback. They tried to get the next quarterback. We all watched it on Hard Knocks. They couldn't end up with Daniels. They couldn't end up with May. So they said, okay, we'll run it back a year. We'll go get Neighbors, and we'll tolerate.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Simply put, the only way to bet this is over under win total. I love Tyronn Lue. I think he's one of the 5 best coaches in the league. But my dear friend George Sorless told us to me a long time ago, you can't win if you don't got the talent. Unfortunately, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to match up.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you. We had a great time here today. I want to tip the cap to everyone behind the glass that makes this happen. Don't go anywhere. Pro Football Today is coming up right behind, and then you got the kickoff. Joseph, my friend, there are 3 things to which you are looking forward. It's time for 3 and out. Let's talk, my friend. What do you like about today? Okay, I think the things that Joe likes the most are the things that cannot be said. The first thing that Joe is talking about is the Miami offense. Now the things that can't be said can be said, Joe. Continue, please.
What happens when you're sick and you hit that cough button and then you're just trying not to embarrass yourself, and then you embarrass yourself anyway. But that's okay. We made it through. I played all 4 quarters. Now it's time to go back to the Advil Colden sign as well. But yes, I'll be in the training room all week. I'll be back again Sunday. Don't worry. Yeah, Miami's offense. I want to see a lot of good things to look for this week. Miami offense with Skylar Thompson. Is it doom and gloom, or is it, I don't know, 20 touches for Devon Achane and a huge play from Tyreek Hill? And next thing you know, we look up and go, look at that. Turns out the Dolphins won that football game. What a shock. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just not drinking the Seattle Seahawks Kool-Aid quite yet. We'll see. If the Seattle Seahawks pound them into submission, I'll be the first to come here next Sunday and be like, hey, how about those Seahawks? They were great. I think the Seahawks are improved. I'm just not sold after you beat the Patriots and the Broncos just how good you are. I think Miami took a big shot here, but sometimes you see these situations too where teams rally behind the backup quarterback. There's a different kind of focus. You've had extra time to prepare this young quarterback here in the backup in Skylar Thompson. Don't count the Dolphins out of this game. I love them to cover. I think it's just way too many points. The Bengals, this is it. Put up or shut up, okay? Because you've been doing a lot of talking. You know, Taylor Britt's been talking. Jamar Chase has been talking. Everybody's been talking. I don't see a lot of W's, though. Get that W against the Washington Commanders today. Put up a big, impressive 30 spot and look like the Cincinnati Bengals. And that will go a long way to making everybody feel warm and fuzzy. And then the Cincinnati Bengals can get off to the races. But if you struggle in this game, if you do not show up this week, there's going to be a lot of chatter about the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they're going to. I think it's going to be fine. T. Higgins being back. Let's go. Let's roll. The Chiefs backfield, the situation where I just don't know if there's any winners and everybody's chasing it. And I'm just kind of like, if anything, maybe you get a little bit more Xavier Worthy working, maybe in the backfield, maybe you get a little more jet sweep to Worthy once or twice. Don't be shocked. Andy Reid. Yeah, Andy Reid is not one to care about your fantasy team when it comes to the backfield. He just does not care. So Patrick Mahomes breaking out Travis Kelce today is necessity. Let's get him force-fed targets. Let's go that route. But look, general day, a lot of really cool stuff in these games. I think a big narrative in that Colts-Bears game, like which Caleb Williams shows up here and which Anthony Richardson shows up. The Chargers-Steelers game. Look, this is old-timey football. If you like defense and field goals, go run to Pittsburgh, because that's what's going to be about today. You got the Buccaneers with a cookie matchup against the Broncos. Handle your business. Get and control that division. Keep building that Buccaneers narrative. You've got the Malik Willis revenge game, quote unquote, against the Titans. Again, Malik has a victory this year. Will Levis has 0. We'll see what the Panthers and Andy Dalton give us. But Matt, I mean, with so many interesting things here, what has your interest piqued in week 3 the most?
Yep, it's the Baltimore Ravens. I want to see this team come out and see who they really are. Otherwise, they just become, I'm looking at Derrick Henry anytime touchdowns, and then that's it. That, to me, is going to be, I don't want to use the term bloodbath, but these teams are going to fight straight up. We saw it, in week 1? And we're going to see it here again.
Yeah, Ravens, Cowboys, too, another one. Is this doom and gloom? Like, somebody's going to have doom and gloom Monday morning, and it's not going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be the Ravens, kids. I really don't. Those Harbaugh teams are well coached. The first loss was real tight. They had an opportunity to win that game. Last week, they had an opportunity to win that game. So now you've got to let all things hang out. You've got to say, enough waiting for Derrick Henry and managing his carries, enough of trying to limit exposure or overexposure to Jackson. No. This is a time where the Baltimore Ravens defense needs to show up, play with more intensity. And it's certainly a moment where I think that it's all systems go. This is fighting for our playoff life a little bit here, because you do not want to keep going into loss after loss after loss to start a season. That's a bad look here. So it's going to be a really interesting, fun week 3 in the NFL, and make sure you stay here on SportsGrid for Pro Football Today for the next 3 hours to get you caught up on all of your wagering. Take some of this fantasy knowledge and apply it to your props, apply it to how you approach your investments in week 3 and beyond. And, of course, shout out to our whole team here at FST, always doing incredible things. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Matt Striker, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
One that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start, so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was Lincoln! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
The sharpest football contest show in the land, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show, focuses on Circus Sports Million, Circus Survivor, and the Westgate Super Contest, handicapping the games and releasing our contest picks every week of the season. With 2 former Super Contest winners, Brady Cannon and James Salinas, a former NFL player, Mike Pritchard, and over $1 million in contest prize money won combined, the Las Vegas Football Contest Show will have you prepared this season.